Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ken Moritsugu. I'm the bureau chief for the Associated Press here in Tokyo. Thank you for coming out today, and I'm sorry to make you wrap up your lunch a little early. I know we started early today, but we would like to get to our speakers. We have a very timely topic, as you all know, today, with Prime Minister Abe set to go to Vladivostok on Friday and meet with President Putin. And now finally the confirmation, the news that Putin himself will come to Japan at the end of the year. So it's a very interesting topic, as you know, the whole territorial dispute and whether there is, in fact, any kind of opening now for a possible resolution to this issue that has plagued Japan and Japan-Russia relations for so long. So we have two very distinguished speakers here today, and I'll briefly introduce them. On my immediate right is Ambassador Magosaki. He is a former senior intelligence analyst at the Foreign Ministry who served as head of the Intelligence and Analysis Bureau. He was ambassador to Uzbekistan and Iran and was also posted to Russia, Britain, Canada, and Iraq. And we were just talking earlier, he was also, while he was in Russia twice. The first time was for the invasion of Czechoslovakia, and the second time for the invasion of Afghanistan. So he's quite experienced in crisis management, I think. He's also a prize-winning author. He caused a stir in 2012 with his best-selling book, Sengoshi no Shotai, The Truths Behind Japan's Post-War History. So he'll speak first, and then after him will be followed by Professor James Brown. Professor Brown is a Russia expert who teaches political science at Temple University's Japan campus. His current research focuses on Japan-Russia relations, and he published a book in March titled Japan, Russia, and Their Territorial Dispute, The Northern Delusion. He has also published papers on the Soviet-Afghan War and media reporting of the Syrian conflict. Just before we get started, a reminder to put your phones on silent mode so we don't have any interruptions during this talk. And with that, I'll turn over to Ambassador Magosaki.
Thank you. Today, I would like to discuss about the last Japanese relation, particularly focusing on Abe-Putin meeting. In order to have the basic understanding on the recent development, I would like to quote Kyodo reporting. Putin and Abe will meet in Vladivostok on September 2nd. The meeting will take place during Abe's trip to Vladivostok to participate in an economic forum to be held there on September 2nd, 3rd at Putin's invitation. Putin and Abe are likely to discuss the former's possible visit to Japan, a plan Moscow and Tokyo have been trying to realize by the end of the year. Abe has proposed Putin visit his political home base of Yamaguchi Prefecture. The proposal is sought to suggest Abe's desire to discuss a long-standing bilateral territorial dispute in a sociable mood. Despite over 4 Russian-administered Japan claimed the island, Etorofu, Kunashiri, Shikotan, and Habomai, has barred Tokyo and Moscow from signing a post-World War II peace treaty. The Eastern Economic Forum will assemble business and government representatives to discuss the economic potential of Russia's Far East and Asia-Pacific region, as well as investment opportunities. Now, that's the end of the quotation. As for economic agenda is concerned, in case that Japanese business circles find profitable, they will pursue the project. I consider that further elaboration is not required, with the reservation of the existence of the problem to coordinate with the current tough U.S. policy toward Russia. The biggest issue is a territorial question. Prime Minister Abe has a strong desire to invite Putin to Japan, and he wants to establish himself as a historical figure by solving the territorial question with Russia. Over about 60 years, the territorial issue has not been solved, and this remains to be the barrier for the development of Russo-Japanese relation. The question is, are there any possible solution? Yes, there is the possible solution, one solution. First, the two sides will conclude the peace treaty, and the Russian side will return Shikotan, Habomai, as agreed in 1956. Second, two sides will agree that they will continue the discussion on Etorofu Kunashiri on the basis that the solution should be pursued on the principle of the historical fairness, thus implying Etorofu and Kunashiri will continue to belong to Russia. In spite of claims by Japanese side that 4 islands are inherent Japanese territory, diplomatically speaking, Japan does not have the strong legal base for its claim. First, the Potsdam Declaration on Japan. Article 8, the term of Cairo Declaration shall be carried out and Japanese sovereignty shall be limited to the island of Honshu, Hokkaido, Kyushu, Shikoku, and such minor islands as we determine. Such minor islands as we determine. After Potsdam Declaration, Allied powers has never included Etorofu Kunashiri in Japanese territory. On the contrary, Allied powers had excluded Kunashiri Islands from Japanese territory. Second, Treaty of Peace with Japan in 1951, San Francisco Treaty. Article 2, Japan denounces all right, title, and claim to the Kuril Island. And Prime Minister Yoshida, the head of Japanese delegation, said in his speech that Etorofu Kunashiri are southern Chishima, that is Kuril. However, he was obliged to renounce the claim on Kuril Island. In the settlement of territorial dispute, the element, what kind of agreement has been made, has a high priority. With the acceptance of Potsdam Declaration and San Francisco Treaty, Japan has few bases for its claim over Etorofu Kunashiri. Over the issue of the territorial question, 3 factors, Japanese, Russian, and American factors, has played. The complexity has come from that these 3 factors has changed their positions due to the changes of their security priorities and domestic policies, and their claim has made influence on other parties. First, Japanese factors. The majority of Japanese public strongly support the claim of 4 islands due to the guidance of the government and the report of the media. The majority of Japanese people do not know the Japanese legal commitment to international community. They do not teach at school the contents of the Potsdam Declaration and the Treaty of Peace with Japan, on the territorial issue. Here is a big gap between Japanese public opinion and Japanese commitment in the past. But after the end of the Cold War, among the ruling circles in Japan, their position toward the territorial issue with Russia has changed, mainly due to the change of the United States position. On this regard, the most active prime minister was Hashimoto in late 1990s. My interpretation of Abe's position and former Prime Minister Mori's position are: first, return of two islands, Shikotan and Habomai. Second, the continuation of the discussion on Etorofu Kunashiri. Next, I would like to discuss about Russian side. In the past, Soviet Union had maintained there is no territorial dispute between Soviet Union and Japan. Then, during the Yeltsin period, with a suggestion by United States not to make territorial issues as a barrier to get money, Russia softened its position and made clear that Russia is ready to discuss the issue. President Putin was more positive. President Putin was eager to solve the territorial question with Japan, and he was ready to probably return Shikotan and Habomai with the signing of the peace treaty. But the Crimea incident forced him to change his position. With the Crimea incident, Western powers has intensified sanctions against Russia. This situation has caused the rise of the strong nationalism inside Russia. Now, even Putin cannot ignore this strong emotion. Recently, the eminent Russian politician whispered to former Prime Minister Hatoyama that first, it is true that Putin was ready to return Shikotai and Habomai. Second, but not anymore. Even Putin cannot ignore the rise of nationalism inside Russia. According to the opinion poll conducted in May, 71% of public oppose the formula of the solution of the territorial issue by returning two islands. Prime Minister Abe wants the success of the Russo-Japanese talks, but he is ready to change Japanese previous position, the claim of 4 islands. But now, Russia has changed its position and is not able to return Shikotan and Habomai. That's my reading. In order to understand the Japanese position toward Russia, we cannot ignore the US influence. Second World War, the start of the Cold War, the end of the Cold War, and the grip of the US foreign policy by so-called neocon group has influenced on Russo-Japanese territorial question. In 1945, February at Yalta Conference, President Roosevelt asked Stalin to start war against Japan. In return, Roosevelt mentioned that Soviet Union will gain Kuril Island. In 1956, when Foreign Minister Shigemitsu reported to Secretary of State Dallas that Japan would like to conclude a peace treaty with the Soviet Union with no claim on Etorofu and Kunashiri, Dallas strongly opposed Shigemitsu. After that, Japan established a policy to claim for Ireland. Following the end of the Cold War, U.S. wanted to assist President Yeltsin in order to get Japanese money. U.S. requested Japan and Russia to reduce tensions over territorial questions. Since then, both sides explored the possibility of reaching the agreement. Many observers think that with the failure of Iraqi war and Afghan war, the influence of neocon in the United States had disappeared. However, as far as U.S. policy toward Russia is concerned, the so-called neocon manages to have upper hand. It has been executed by Assistant Secretary Victoria Nuland. Abe wants the success of the summit meeting with Putin, and Japanese media will report along Abe's request. However, in reality, the prospect of the success is very low. In case, if Abe's policy toward Russia is successful, there might be another U.S. intervention, but the current dim prospect of the success of Abe's policy toward Russia does not require such bold action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Magosaki. That was a very good overview of the situation. I enjoyed hearing some of the background, the historical background, which I think some of us tend to forget or not always be as familiar with, and also a rather pessimistic outlook, but a very realistic one, perhaps. Let me turn the floor over now to Professor Brown.
Thank you very much. So, having heard that very good historical overview, I'm going to focus on much more contemporary developments, especially on the upcoming meeting in Vladivostok. So I've got a little bit about the context here, but I'll just go through that really quite quickly. Clearly, Abe is incredibly enthusiastic about building relations with Russia. I've heard it said that he almost has an obsession about this issue. He's had already 13 meetings with Putin, and perhaps even more significantly, this trip to Vladivostok is going to be his 4th trip to Russia in a row without any return visits from the Russian leader. This has all been building up to this year, and of those various meetings, it's the one which took place in Sochi in May, which I think is the most significant. It was there, of course, where Abe announced his new approach to relations with Russia, and also came forward with his 8-point economic cooperation plan. He agreed to go to Vladivostok for the Eastern Economic Forum, taking place on the 2nd of September, and also he has the idea of holding subsequent meetings this year. There is the possibility of the two meeting on the sidelines of the G20 in China. It was thought that there was also the possibility of the meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, but just a couple of days ago it was announced that Putin's now not going to attend that. But there very much remains the possibility, the likelihood, as you might have seen in your newspapers this morning, that Putin's visit to Japan will go ahead in December. We now have it said from Ushakov on the Russian side that a date has actually been agreed, although it's not been made public yet. It's expected, however, to be at the beginning of December. It's going to be 1 night, 2 days in Yamaguchi, and it's expected it's going to be at an onsen resort. So maybe they can talk about the territorial dispute whilst relaxing in the bath. All of this enthusiasm from Abe is, of course, guided by his desire to be a historic Japanese Prime Minister in reaching a breakthrough on the territorial dispute. I'll get back to that a little bit later on. But he also clearly is influenced by the idea that closer ties with Russia make sense for security reasons as well. Thinking about the long-term question of regional security, clearly it makes sense if Japan and Russia have better relations. Japan doesn't want to be surrounded by a hostile North Korea, a hostile China, and a hostile Russia. Okay, so that's the context on the Japanese side. What about on the Russian side? Well, it seems to me that the Russian side is delighted by Abe's kind of attempt to build a new relationship with Russia, and that's for both political and economic reasons. On the political side, first of all, Russia is clearly still under sanctions from G7 countries. And with Abe traveling to both Sochi and Vladivostok this year, welcoming Putin, from the Russian side, this is very helpful because it shows that the US policy of isolating Russia is not going entirely well. And some Russian academics have actually described Japan as acting as a sort of G7 strike breaker in not following fully the policy of trying to isolate Russia. Added to this is the Russian government's enthusiasm for closer economic cooperation with Japan. This particularly is related to Russia's plan to push forward with the economic development of Siberia and the Far East. This is one of the Russian government's #1 priorities at the moment. Clearly, China, Southeast Asian countries, Korea can potentially help with this, but having as many economic partners in Asia as possible is really helpful. So what happened is that after Abe went to Sochi, announced this 8-point economic cooperation plan, the Russian side looked to make the most of this opportunity and followed it up with a series of visits from other Russian officials. So we almost straight away had the visit from Deputy Prime Minister Trudnev. He's also the presidential envoy to the Russian Far East. He came in May. Speaker of the Duma, Narishkin, he has a strong interest in Japan. He's a frequent visitor. He came in June, had a meeting with Prime Minister Abe. And then finally in July, Minister of Economic Development coming and looking to follow up on the 8-point economic cooperation plan by proposing a further 49 cooperation projects, although it remains very vague what these projects actually are. So the basic point is the Russian side is very enthusiastic to accept this rapprochement from Japan. Okay, so coming up to the Eastern Economic Forum then, which is taking place 2nd and 3rd of September. This is actually a very recent innovation from the Russian side connected with this plan of developing the Far East. So it's only the second time that it's been held. And it connects with these further efforts that they've really been intensifying since 2012. It was in 2012 when Russia set up its Ministry of Far Eastern Development. It was also in 2012 where, as you might remember, Russia hosted the APEC summit in Vladivostok, connecting that with building a lot of new infrastructure in the city, a couple of new bridges, and also a very large new university campus. And that's what's pictured there. I visited last year. It's really, really quite an impressive new campus. I'd certainly be happy if my university had those facilities. That was where the APEC summit was hosted, then turned over to the university, but they still use it for events. And that's where the Eastern Economic Forum is going to be held. Further things as well, connected to this broader push to develop the Russian Far East, they've introduced areas of priority development. These are essentially free trade zones where there's lower regulations, increased incentives for companies to invest there. And the really eye-catching one has been the Vladivostok Free Port, which has recently come into effect, trying to encourage Vladivostok to become a real center of trade and commerce for the Asia-Pacific. Connected with that is also a plan to introduce a visa-free program where visitors to Vladivostok could go there for 8 days without a visa. That's not actually been introduced yet, but is planned. Okay, so the broader picture is that Russian government really pushing to try and make a success of developing the Far East, and the Eastern Economic Forum is part of that. However, last year it wasn't entirely a success. It was the first time that they'd hosted such a big event, and there were quite a lot of organizational problems, issues to do with transport, accreditation. there also weren't that many really kind of high-profile deals. So they're hoping to improve on it this year, have a number of more significant deals, and also eliminate those organizational problems. So in that context, it's been a real gift to the Russian side to have Prime Minister Abe attending this forum. You might have noticed also that he's going to be joined there by President Park, who's also going. So this has been a real success for Russia. Okay, so what can be expected of this meeting? That's the most important point, I suppose. Well, I don't anticipate there being any really large-scale economic deals being reached. That's for a couple of reasons. First of all, Japan still has sanctions against Russia. More broadly, because of US sanctions against Russia, other countries too are reluctant to sign major deals with Russia at this time. In addition to that, as well, it takes quite a long time to put together these really large deals, and the 8-point economic cooperation plan was only announced in May, so it's perhaps a little bit too soon. There will be some agreements, however, and it seems like the real focus is going to be on the agreement between Russia and Japan on healthcare cooperation. Now, within the list of the 8-point economic cooperation plan, healthcare was actually at the top of the Japanese list. It was point number 1. And this seems to be an area in which the two sides can reach relatively easy agreement. It seems that to begin with, they're going to have a working group between the relevant ministries, and they're going to talk about how Japanese healthcare can help to improve the delivery of healthcare services in the Russian Far East. So in the future, perhaps Japanese hospitals being set up in Vladivostok. So that's one potential focal point. There are also likely to be discussions on what's called the energy ring. This is different from the sometimes mentioned plan of exporting pipeline gas from Sakhalin to Japan. Instead, this is about potential exports of electricity from hydroelectric plants in Sakhalin to Japan. I don't expect these discussions really to go anywhere, however. These sorts of enormous infrastructure projects have been discussed for a number of years. They don't tend to move forward that much. There will be some other agreements. It's expected that there'll be an agreement of intent signed about a Mitsubishi investment in a methanol plant in Sakhalin. Also some discussion of Japanese investment in a spa resort in Sakhalin as well. So we're not really talking about enormous kind of billion-dollar agreements, but the idea is to gradually move in the right direction to get something to build upon. Okay, so light on economic agreements, but potentially much heavier in terms of political symbolism. Just the fact of Abe being there in Vladivostok is a very significant development. He's the first Japanese prime minister to visit the city. And also the talks with Putin are expected to try and build further on their already quite close relationship. So presidential aide Ushakov over the last couple of days has been giving some more details about what is likely to be talked about in the summit between Abe and Putin in Vladivostok. So the Russian side intends to focus on issues of regional security, including the situation on the Korean Peninsula. Also, he mentioned ongoing anti-narcotics cooperation between Japan and Russia related to Afghanistan. And also, he's mentioned that they would touch upon the issue of the peace treaty. And clearly, all of this, at least from the perspective of the Japanese side, building towards the Putin visit in December. Okay, so to return to the territorial dispute then, and my assessment of what could occur during Abe's term in office. Well, there's both an optimistic and a pessimistic scenario, and I'll begin with the optimistic one. So those who believe that something can actually be achieved here focus on the perception of Putin as being relatively pro-Japanese. And those who are persuaded of that view have also looked to the appointment of Anton Vaino as chief of staff, replacing Putin, the Putin ally, Sergei Ivanov. And the reason why that's mentioned is because Vaino used to be a Russian diplomat and was in the Russian embassy in Tokyo for about 5 years from 1999. And so some people have interpreted that as being a sign of Putin's enthusiasm for closer relations with Russia and potential to actually come to a deal. They also point, the optimists, to Putin's record of surprises when it comes to foreign policy. He's also made some territorial concessions in the past, principally to China, but also to an extent to Norway as well. They also focus on the weakness of the Russian economy, suggesting that in those circumstances, Russia would be particularly enthusiastic to make closer relations with Japan to attract Japanese investment. And it's also been suggested that perhaps now might be a time that could be quite good for a deal, because perhaps US opposition might be lower because the US is distracted by the ongoing election campaign. Okay, so those are the reasons why some people are optimistic, and some Western academics have even put forward a potential deal that is even more optimistic than the possible scenario of a transfer of just 2 islands and continued talks. It's been suggested that perhaps a deal could be done with 3 islands eventually going to Japan and just 1 island remaining with Russia. And those who have proposed this idea suggest that the deal would be that Eterofu would remain with Russia, that's the largest of the islands. Japan would gain sovereignty over Kunashiri, but the island would remain under Russian administration for example, a 99-year lease. And more rapidly, the islands of Shikotan and Habomai would be returned, or at least transferred, to Japan. Okay, so that's the optimistic scenario. I don't buy that at all. I'm very much in the pessimistic camp. I think that in actual fact, despite all of these movements, these meetings, the sides actually remain really quite far apart. It still remains the case that Putin, at most, at absolute maximum, would agree to the transfer of 2 islands after the signing of a peace treaty, but that would be it. And for the Japanese side, that's not sufficient. So I think that they're still quite far apart. And also, if you look at some of the statements that have been made by Russian leaders, they provide no encouragement to the Japanese side whatsoever. Foreign Minister Lavrov has frequently made comments which are really quite discouraging, including, I think it was at the end of May, saying we're not giving up the Kuril Islands and we're not begging Japan for a peace treaty. In the same month, just a few days after meeting Abe in Sochi, President Putin said that, in response to a journalist's question, we're not selling anything, we're not considering selling anything, but there are plenty of things that we might buy. And it seemed that that was very clearly a suggestion that economic incentives from Japan were not going to persuade the Russian side into territorial concessions. It's also worth noting that there have been these ongoing peace treaty talks at vice ministerial level between Morgulov, Deputy Foreign Minister of Russia, and Japan's Special Representative for Relations with Russia, Mr. Harada. These have taken place in June and also more recently on the 26th of August, but they don't seem to be making any progress whatsoever. Added to that is the issue of Russian public opinion. This is the same figure that was mentioned by Mr. Magosaki, the recent opinion poll which shows that 71% of Russians are against even the transfer of those 2 smaller islands, even though those islands only represent 7% of the total. So you can see that it wouldn't be easy for Putin even to agree to that 2-island deal. Final few points. Other reasons why Russia is unlikely to make concessions is because of increased investments, including military investments on the islands. That relates to the picture I've got there. That's a new health clinic on Shikotan Island. That's particularly interesting because building a lot of new infrastructure on Shikotan, as well as Eterofu and Kunashiri, suggests that there's a clear reluctance even to make a 2-island deal. And finally, on that point, even though the Russian side, as I said, is very keen to have increased economic cooperation, there's a recognition that even if the Japanese government wills it, it's not straightforward for there to be a huge amount of Japanese investment in the Russian Far East. Japanese large companies are only going to do that if they believe their investment is going to be profitable, if it's going to be relatively low risk. And at the moment, that's certainly not the case, especially because many of the large Japanese companies also have operations in the United States. And they are not going to risk attracting opprobrium from Washington by dealing and investing in Russia in a large way at a time when Russia remains under sanctions. So my conclusion is also a pessimistic one, that the talks will continue, relations will still improve in terms of things like economics and security cooperation, but no island deal is in sight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Brown, for bringing us up to speed with your latest thoughts on this difficult situation. We'd like to open the floor now to questions, and as is our practice, we'll take questions first from the working press. Please state your name and your affiliation when you come up to ask a question.
Thank you, Ambassador Magosaki and Dr. Brown. So I heard your very pessimistic analysis of what's going to happen or what will happen eventually. I think both of you made your position very clear that the islands are not going to be returned. But the Japanese government, I think they're making a historical shift that they might provide some economic cooperation even when the resolution talk is not going to move forward. So in your view, I'd like to ask two of you, is the Japanese government making wrong assessment, or what are they doing? Like, it's been 7 years and they've tried, but it's not being resolved. So what's your assessment? Why is the Japanese government trying to make this historical shift?
I'm sorry, can I just, I know who you are, but can you just, for the benefit of the room, give your name and affiliation?
Oh, sorry. My name is Aya Komie. I'm from the Japan Times.
Yeah. On the different issue, for example, TPP. In the United States, there is no prospect of ratification. But Abe's government is going to pass in the Diet, even with using a very undemocratic way. Why? In the United States, there is no chance of passing it. So, unfortunately, when some bureaucrats, some people make suggestions or proposal to Abe, and once Abe accepted, those bureaucrats are not giving enough information or negative information to Abe once situation has changed. In case of territorial issue, as I mentioned before, probably Russian side is ready to return to small island. But situation has changed after the Crimea incident. But probably Japanese diplomats are afraid to give the Abe the new change of the situation. That's every aspect of the politics in Japanese situations around Abe.
Yeah, in my view, it very much is to do with Abe personally. All politicians, all leaders have particular subjects that they're interested in. And it's said often that Abe is particularly interested in the North Korean issue, especially the abductions issue, and also with Russia. Some people put it down to trying to complete the work of his father, who was obviously involved in relations with the Soviet Union as foreign minister. And more generally, Abe seems to be the sort of leader that has a lot of self-belief. He believes that he can actually make deals, that he can be a transformational prime minister. On the other side, you can also say that it's not such a bad kind of calculation, even if this comes to nothing, because what is the downside? At worst, he ends up with an improved relationship with Russia, which provides economic opportunities and an improved security situation. The Russian side is not going to embarrass him by kind of making it absolutely clear that he has no chance whatsoever. They will continue to kind of show that they're willing to talk about a peace treaty and thereby, inevitably talking about the islands. And he's not going to be punished by the electorate for this because it's not such a key electoral kind of issue. And also, I don't think that the American side is so annoyed, or so, I should say, concerned about this, that Abe risks damaging the relationship with the United States. So essentially, it's a relatively low-risk strategy.
Kobayashi freelancer. Magosaki-san, you clearly wrote that the United States clearly intervened in the peace treaty negotiation process in 1956.
Yes.
And I think history will repeat. And what action do you anticipate from the United States this time?
Yeah. And it's very simple. The United States say, we do not like your policy. Then Abe will agree, follow. If you look at the Yasukuni Line cases, he wanted to visit, and once the United States say, we do not like it, then he dropped it. And the Comfort Women's cases with Korea, the Abe's group wanted to revise the history, and the United States that we do not like your access, then he changed his policy. So just say that Abe, we do not like your policy, then Abe will follow United States.
Yeah, I think I differ slightly on that. I mean, clearly Abe will not do something which will risk the relationship with the United States seriously. But on this issue, he has shown a willingness to not exactly defy, but perhaps go a little bit against the United States. After all, there was a phone call from President Obama to Abe in February suggesting that this was a bad time to be visiting Russia, this ahead of the Sochi visit, but Abe went ahead nonetheless. So I think it seems like he is willing to go somewhat against the United States in his pursuit of relations with Russia, but clearly not fully.
If I could just follow up, maybe you could, both of you could talk a little bit about why the U.S. might oppose a deal at this point, or whether its opposition would be different than, say, in the 1950s.
When we look at the U.S. current policies, maybe many people do not agree, but I think that the U.S. policy toward Russia is dominated by so-called neocon groups. The active person is Assistant Secretary Nuland, and these groups want the tension with Russia to have favorable security relations in NATO. This is my reading. Therefore, the Abe's position is different from current U.S. policy toward Russia. But as I mentioned before, in spite of Abe's some activities, probably there will be no big deals with Russia. Therefore, these groups can watch relatively safely without any concern. That's my reading.
Yeah. And I don't really disagree. I think that it relates very much to contemporary politics related, first of all, to the situation in Ukraine, that the United States takes the position that Russia changed the status quo by force through its actions in Ukraine, through its annexation of Crimea. And the United States is concerned about that, both because of Russian actions, but also because of the precedent it sets. And clearly the US is thinking about China's actions in East Asia in this regard. So they don't want it to be seen that a country can get away with changing the status quo by force. And that's why they regard it as very negative that Japan should be in some ways going against the policy of isolating Russia and instead trying to build relations at this time. In the future, however, I think the United States wouldn't necessarily be against the territorial deal.
Any more questions from the working press?
I'm very impressed by this combination of diplomat with professor, and I really enjoyed the analysis.
Can you tell us who you are first?
Oh, sorry. My name is Khalil. I'm ambassador of Bahrain. Some think that the Syrian war is a war between Putin and Obama. My question is, if Mr. Trump win the election, what will be the situation Russian-Japanese relationship, and what will happen in Syria? Thank you.
With Trump, he mentioned that any remarks are just suggestion. So it's very difficult to anticipate what kind of policies will be under President my thinking is the Trump's position toward Syria is slightly different from current U.S. policy. He is not so supportive of U.S. interventions by forces. I think this is a different, and probably that's the main reason why the military circles, current establishment have some suspicion over Trump's position. As far as the Russo-Japanese relation is concerned, there will be no territorial development in the future. Therefore, there will be no dramatic diplomatic achievement between Russia and Japan. That means there will be no concern for the United States to take any action on this issue.
Yes, I mean, with regard to Trump, it's very difficult to say what his policy would be. I don't think he knows exactly what his policy is either. But from looking at his comments, that it seems likely that the US would take a smaller role in terms of military activities abroad. He also seems to be less kind of anti-Russian, if you like. So that would mean perhaps the US playing a lesser role related to Syria, and also perhaps being a bit more open to cooperation with Russia over Syria. To connect that back to Japan, there was one interesting development over the last few days. There was a meeting between, I think it was the deputy Russian defense minister and the Japanese ambassador to Russia. And during that meeting, the Russian side suggested to Japan, why don't you help and cooperate with our humanitarian activities related to Aleppo? And there wasn't any response from the Japanese side in that regard. I don't think it's something which is going to happen, but it's interesting that the Russian side would even raise that as a possibility.
Any more questions from the working press?
Siegfried Knittel, writing for the Austrian newspaper, Der Standard. Mr. Magosaki, you had an interesting point, what I never heard of before. You said it's a Japanese the education system, it's education of the Japanese people after the Second World War led to this kind of thinking of the Japanese people, the islands of the Northern Islands should come back to Japan. Because, you know, I'm German. We lost a lot of territory, and the Germans all accepted it. And I think I think it's normal in history. If a country loses a war, they will lose territory. So is this the reason, the wrong education, the reason Japanese cannot accept this kind of result of the war to lose territory?
I always say that we should learn from Germany. And thank you very much. And for example, Alsace-Lorraine. Yeah. The Japanese position, as I mentioned, till 1956, we are ready to settle the issue, saying that abandoning Kunashiri Etorofu and returning Habomai Shikotan. But unfortunately, United States intervened. And unfortunately, United States want the tension over the territorial question in order to stop the developments between Soviet Union and Japan. And the difference between Japan and Germany is 1970s, 1980s, you established very independent policy toward the Soviet Union, toward Russia. But unfortunately, in the case of Japan, Japan lost the independent foreign policy. We are following just United States. That's the difference.
On the education question, it just so happens at the moment I'm doing a project on how Russia is presented in Japanese history textbooks. And so I've looked at it in quite a lot of detail. It's not overly negative, but when it comes to the territorial dispute, there are guidelines from the ministry which suggest that textbooks should describe the islands as being inherent Japanese territory. So that means that the textbooks are required to describe the islands in the way that the government wants them to be seen.
A question to both of you. The meeting between Abe and Putin will be held on the 2nd of September. Now, in 1945, on the same day, Japan signed an unconditional surrender. Do you think that is a coincidence or some kind of intentional decision by the side of Putin?
I do not have. I do not think that there is any intention on the side of Putin. But as you mentioned, 2nd of September. I would like to say, when Japan ends the war, it's the 2nd of September. It's not the 15th of August. And why we are not putting the focus on the 2nd of September? It's because they do not want public knew the content of this agreement. The agreement is we will follow totally the direction of Allied forces. That's Japanese side do not want to understand this case.
Yeah, I think it's just a coincidence, but an interesting one. It's not the only coincidence, though, that when Abe went to Sochi for the first time for the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics, that was on the 7th of February, which is Japan's Northern Territories Day. But again, I mean, that was just a coincidence, I think. One final thing on dates, that if they were to reach a deal, this year would be a very good year to do it because it's the 60th anniversary of the Joint Declaration of 1956, where they came closest to actually reaching a deal. But as I said, unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen.
Süddeutsche Zeitung Neidhardt. I would like to ask you, isn't the Japanese government much more happy with the current situation than it admits? I mean, it makes all these noises about getting the territories back, but in terms of fisheries, and fisheries is one of the main economic activity on those islands. In terms of fisheries, the Japanese government has the best possible situation because of this murky status of the islands. A lot of Russian, Ukrainian fishermen are poaching fish in Russian waters with international flags and selling it in Nemuro as a domestic fish. So they avoid quotas, they avoid taxes. Isn't that a perfect situation?
Maybe I do not follow your argument, but if Japan is sincere to ask Russia to return to Ireland, in the future, I think still there is a possibility. If we stick to this, the claim over two islands, Kunashiri, Haboman, Shikotan, there's a possibility in the future, and this will give good benefit to Japanese fishery industry, fish industry.
Yeah, it's an interesting suggestion that often frozen conflicts can have their benefits, but I think that's predominantly at a regional level, at a local level. And I think that Japanese national leaders, when they do pursue these negotiations, I think they are sincere, that they really do want a deal. And I think that Abe really thinks that he actually can make a deal. As I said before, he does seem to have that high level of self-belief. I don't think he's just playing games, trying to string this out forever. And if they wanted really a genuinely beneficial arrangement to do with fisheries, it would be much more beneficial to accept the transfer of two islands, and then that would come with it significant benefits in terms of access to waters.
Correspondent of Singapore Press, Ho Ling, Lianhe Zaobao. I would like to know that since the date of meeting, Abe's and Putin's meeting up on September the 2nd, and Abe's on the 4th and 5th will be the China G20. Do you think that this is a kind of Japanese way of doing nemawashi? That means to make something special before the G20?
I do not think so. It's coincidental. But I have to add to my remarks on the 2nd of September. The Stalin mentioned today we made the revenge. So there might be something in their mind.
On the issue of China, yeah, it's been announced that Putin is going to be meeting with President Xi on the 4th of September. So it'd be very interesting to see the contrast between these two meetings. That how will the sort of body language compare? And clearly, this is an ideal situation for the Russian side. If both China and Japan are trying to kind of improve their relations with Russia, that puts Russia in a stronger position.
Maybe I could just ask, both of you obviously are very pessimistic that any kind of deal is possible. So I'm just kind of an open question, but we've gone 70 years without a deal, so to speak. Are there any risks or dangers if this situation were just to continue forever?
as a German friend mentioned, I think it's not good to have territorial dispute forever. We have to solve the territorial questions with Russia, with Korea, and with China. And in the case of Russia, I think, as I mentioned, there is a formula. If we stick to the international commitment, there is a possibility. And this is the same with the China and same with Korea. I think the putting territorial questions, putting the stress on the territorial question, that's the long strategy for any country. And unfortunately, in the case of Japan, territorial questions will be put much forward. Unfortunately, they want to create tensions in the neighboring countries. This is a very unhealthy situation. And so in every time I mentioned that we should follow, we should learn from Germany.
Yeah, I'd just say that I don't think there's any immediate risk, even though there is not a peace treaty. Clearly, there's no kind of prospect of Russia and Japan resuming hostilities. And in fact, a number of leading Russian politicians have said that, well, maybe we don't actually need a peace treaty with Japan because, you know, clearly we're not in a state of war. And indeed, the state of war was officially ended in 1956. But at the same time, I would certainly agree that this is an unhealthy situation. The kind of East Asian region is in a period of flux. We don't know what is going to happen in the future. And having these lingering territorial disputes is very unhealthy. Could it be the case that in the future the region could be divided again into blocks? If so, having continuing territorial disputes between Japan and its neighboring states could be really quite dangerous as potential flashpoints.
Let me go there first and the ambassador next.
Stig Leising, German Press Agency, DPA. Thank you very much for your explanations. My question is, in case, and you predict that there will be no deal when it comes to the territorial dispute, neither in September nor during the summit between Putin and Abe in December, and also in light of the recent Russian investments on the islands, do you think that the chances to reach a deal is actually getting smaller if these two chances pass without any solution? Thank you.
We have agreement with Russia. In that agreement, Russia promised return to island. It's already done. And why Russia cannot return these two small islands now is because of the increase of nationalism. It's a temporary phenomenon. Maybe this might be continued, but it could be changed. Once the Western countries want to establish good relations, friendly relations with Russia, then the Russian nationalism will decrease. Then they could be much more realistic, and they could accept their obligation to return to small island. So currently, this is a temporary high nationalistic atmosphere in Russia. Therefore, they couldn't. But this atmosphere may change in the future.
I think I take a slightly different view on that, in that I think that this actually remains a window of opportunity for Japan because of Putin. Putin is a little bit unusual when it comes to Japan policy. He is the first kind of Russian leader to say that he would uphold the 1956 agreement. So that means he's the first Russian leader to say that he would definitely go for the transfer of the two smaller islands after the signing of a peace treaty. I don't think the next president is likely to take that same position. Putin is an unusually popular Russian leader. His successor is likely to be less popular, and that leader is not likely to want to take on unpopular foreign policy decisions. As I've mentioned, 71% of the Russian population is against the transfer of two islands. Whilst Putin might be willing to go for that, the next leader might not. So I think that this is a window of opportunity, but while some on the Japanese side believe that it's a window of opportunity to get more than two, I think it's a window of opportunity to get only two. But that's the maximum they can get.
Ambassador.
Your Excellency, you brought important differentiation between Germany and Japan, and you brought the issue of September 2nd. Now, and you talked about this, Japan will follow the alliance. My question is, when Japan will become like Germany and make their own decision? This is the question for Your Excellency. The second question for the professor. You know, gambling and casinos is very profitable. We see Las Vegas, we see China, Macau, and so on. My question is, Japan is looking for somewhere to have casinos and gambling. Is this island be a perfect place for both China and, I mean, Japan and, you know, Russia?
When we compare Japan and Germany, historically speaking, there is a great difference. After the end of the Second World War, Japan has a government. Japan has a country. And this country made a deal with the United States. We will follow the direction which you make. We will follow, we will do whatever you say. This is the start of Japan. But in the case of Germany, you have no country. In order to create a country, you need harmony with other countries. You need occupation forces. You need harmony with France. You need harmony with the UK. You need harmony with Russia. Therefore, your policy is not only for the United States. You should be friendly with neighboring countries. Only with having good relations with neighboring countries, they will accept your country. But Japan can get the independence because of the foreign United States. Unfortunately, this tendency has been intensified during Abe's period, and I think it's a very dim prospect that in the future, Japan will establish independent foreign policies. We had independent foreign policies till 1980s, maybe. But we have changed it. And the future, it's a very dim prospect.
I'll get to the casinos in just a second, but if I may chip in also on the issue of why Northeast Asia can't be more like kind of Europe and Germany. I think the key is to do with institutionalization. There's nothing like the European Union in East Asia. It's not very popular to be kind of talking about the benefits of the European Union at the moment, especially from kind of British accents. But clearly the absence of anything like that has made it that much more difficult to find reconciliation in Northeast Asia. But to the casinos, I've heard all sorts of suggestions as to how to solve this problem. This is the first time I've heard the one about casinos, but there's a demand for gambling, and it's something which Vladivostok actually has sought to exploit. They've set up a casino in Vladivostok with the hope of attracting gamblers from China, Japan and South Korea. I think it's actually headed by a Scottish bloke, actually. But as to having a casino on the islands, well, I don't think so. It's not such an attractive place to go. Lots of fog on these islands, lots of rain. I think it might be more appealing to go to Macau or Las Vegas.
Takashi Koyama, freelance. Does the Russian public support Putin's policy in Syria?
You want to take that one?
All right. Yeah, essentially, yes. That I don't have any kind of up-to-date figures off the top of my head, but yeah, it remains still relatively popular, helped by very favorable coverage by the Russian television. However, there is the danger that this might lead to a backlash and increased terrorist attacks within Russia. If that were to happen, you could find that support for Russia's campaign in Syria could quickly evaporate. But so far, it's been popular.
The return of some small islands to Japan from Russia, and what would it mean for the Russian-China's relations? I think will be China. Would it be happy with such a deal? I think Russia needs China as a kind of a partner. So I think it's not easy from this reason, I think, to give even some small islands back to Japan.
Contrary to the general understanding, my reading of Chinese policy is to have peace in general. They want to have peace situation in Senkaku Island. They want to stick to previous understanding. Therefore, as far as territorial question is concerned, China wants to have diplomatic understanding, diplomatic agreement. Therefore, I think they do not oppose the solving the territorial questions between Russia and Japan. Once Japan take the position, they will go for diplomatic solutions on the territorial questions. They are much more proactive on the diplomatic solution, including Senkaku Island. I think this is the benefit for China.
Yeah, I don't think China is particularly concerned about, Russia and Japan coming to a territorial agreement. That Russia has made it very clear in discussions with Japan that closer relations with Japan would not come at the expense of Russia's relations with China. This came to light with the 2+2 discussions, which were held between the Russian and Japanese foreign defense ministers it's been November 2013. And at that meeting, Japan tried to talk about China. And the Russian side said absolutely not. They refused to talk about China at that meeting. So I think that Russia's made it quite clear that any closer relations with Japan wouldn't be at the expense of its relationship with China. One further thing to mention is that it might be quite surprising, but China's official position on the Northern Territories issue actually backs the Japanese side. This is left over from the Cold War period when you had the Sino-Soviet split. So China's position is actually more pro-Japan officially on that. There have been some suggestions, though, that China has, behind the scenes, suggested to the Russian side that maybe they could support Russia over the Northern Territories, thereby changing their position if Russia were to become more supportive of China over the Senkaku issue. Russia at the moment has a position of neutrality neutral position over the sovereignty issue over the Senkaku. So far, however, Russia has said that it's not interested, it doesn't want to connect those two issues.
Why don't you go first and then...
I would like to know how Russia feel about North Korea issue, since this is quite a heat issue nowadays in the East Asia.
Maybe long, but I think they want stability as far as North Korea is concerned. They do not want disturbance in North Korea. But I'm not sure. I have the basis to come to this conclusion.
Yeah. I think the Russian position is somewhat mixed. They have some sympathy for North Korea, and they believe that the United States can act unnecessarily, kind of provocatively towards North Korea. They are somewhat sympathetic to the idea that North Korea feels itself surrounded, but at the same time, they are very much against the development of North Korea's nuclear program, also its missile technology, and that's for two reasons. It's the direct reason of that meaning an expansion of the nuclear club, thereby eroding kind of Russia's kind of special status in that area, but it's also because of the recognition that North Korea's nuclear program and missile threat leads to the United States and its allies investing more in missile defense. And that is one of the major security concerns for the Russian side. So it's both direct and indirect concerns.
Although you both have this pessimistic view that there will be no deal when it comes to the territory dispute, but assuming there will be sooner or later a deal, and this issue will be solved between the countries. What do you expect in terms of the relation between the two countries when it comes to the economy, when it comes to politics, also international politics? So what will be the situation look like, and what will be the future look like, in your opinion? Thank you.
As I mentioned, there's a possibility in the future there could be a solution. But if we look at the current situations, it's greatly influenced not only by bilateral relations, it's influenced by international situations. So we are depending on the climate of international development, and not vice versa. Much more we are dependent on the international climate rather than we create some new changes of international climate.
Yeah. So if there were suddenly to be a deal, well, I mean, first of all, I'd go and visit the islands very quickly, because it's not possible on a British passport for me to do that from the kind of Japanese side, so I've just had to go and look at them from Nemuro, so that's one thing. But after that, what would happen to relations? Well, actually, I don't think that they would suddenly become enormously close, that there would be some huge flood of investment into Russia with Japanese companies. And the reason for that is because I don't think that over the last few decades, the main reason for a lack of investment has been the absence of a peace treaty. It's instead been, in part, the risk-averse nature of Japanese companies. They don't think that Russia is an ideal place to do business, and I think what would make a bigger difference is Russia sorting out its investment climate rather than actually settling the peace treaty. And that's something which has been a real priority over the last few years of President Putin. He's trying to get Russia up the league tables in ease of doing business. I think that would make, if anything, a bigger difference rather than actually settling the peace treaty.
We go here and then back to the ambassador.
Ambassador Magosaki, you mentioned Russian public opinion as an obstacle to a 2-2 deal. Now, under Hatoyama, there was another the Russian diplomats had another idea of a 2-2 deal where Shikotan would stay with Russia and Edorov would stay with Russia, while Japan would get a very generous solution of getting Kunashir and Habomai, and the 2-2 would be kept alive as an idea. But this obviously was not enough for the Japanese government. The Japanese government wanted to have everything or nothing until recently. So where's the red line of the Japanese government? I mean, to blame the Russian public opinion from Tokyo is kind of, I'm sorry to say, it's a cheap excuse, because so far the Japanese government was historically the obstacle, as you showed. So where's the red line of the Japanese government?
You are correct that the blame should be put on the Japanese side, that in spite of international commitment, we claimed 4 islands. From the point of international commitment, we do not have any legal base for Kunashiri and Edorov. Therefore, by claiming 4 islands, we stopped to come to the conclusion. So I think you are right that basically we have some blame. But now, I think from 1990s, Japanese politicians started to look at the solution of 2+2. And I think this is Hashimoto thinking that way. They didn't say openly, but Prime Minister Mori, I think he thinking that way, and Mr. Abe also think in that way. So now the Japanese situation has changed, and if Russia come to agree on the 2+2, then there is a possibility to come to the agreement. But I think under the current international situations, I understand the rise of nationalism. I do not explain what happened in Crimea and what happened with the relation with Ukraine. But there is a base for Russia to have the anxiety, and I understand that this situation has not created only by Russia. This has created by Western powers. I agree. I have agreement. I understand that. But if we look at the territorial questions, current nationalism stopped to come to the agreement, and I think in the future, with the disappearance of this nationalistic mood, there might be possibility for Russia to look at their commitment in 1956 and to accept this international commitment in the future.
Yeah, I think it's correct to absolutely focus on Japanese public opinion, because it does make it very difficult for any Japanese leader, whether now or in the future, to compromise, because there are unrealistic expectations. That there continue to be a number of articles written frequently in Japan about the danger that these islands are becoming increasingly Russified. And when I read that, I just think that it's absurd. How much more Russian can these islands become? That Japan is not going to get these 4 islands back. That is completely impossible. So the idea of politicians still talking about the return of all 4 is just completely unrealistic. And so if a Japanese government really wants to come to a deal on this, they need to engage in a bit of expectation management. They need to explain to the Japanese public the historical situation, the legal situation, and make it be known that it would actually be really quite an achievement for a Japanese leader even to get 2.
I'm really very impressed by the discussion. And I want to ask a question about rising China. There are two views. One says that China is going to be a superpower, become aggressive, become invasive. The second view says that China history doesn't suggest that, with the wisdom of Confucianism. For that, I don't know what's your opinion about this.
If any organ or any country have the fear about the rise of China, it could be U.S. Defense Department. But in 2009, U.S. Defense Department published the Chinese power, reported to the Congress. Annually, they are obliged to report on China to the Congress. They said in this way, how Chinese strategy is formulated. First, Chinese leader want the continuation of the domination of Communist Party. Second, in order to continue the dominance of Communist Party, there is a necessity to get the support of public. How to get the support of the public? The ideology lost its appeal, and the making the neighboring countries as an enemy will bring the situation that the party is not strong enough. So there is a possibility of backfire. Then, only situation to get the public support is to increase economic situation of individuals in China. How to develop the Chinese economy? They need market for Chinese commodity. They need material, they need technology. Therefore, basically speaking, for the Chinese Communist Party to have the peaceful international environment is beneficial. This is a conclusion by the Department of Defense of the United States 2009, reported to the Congress. I agree with this assessment.
We're running out of time. We'll take one more question from the back of the room there.
Hi, Walter Sim from the Straits Times in Singapore. Going back to the Russia meeting this Friday, with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and President Park Geun-hye of South Korea attending, I was wondering if you see any room for trilateral cooperation on either the economic or strategic fronts for the three countries. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's an intriguing possibility that you think, why not? That they're all going to be there, but that's not at all on the schedule. It's not expected, but who knows in future, because South Korea has maintained a relatively good relationship with Russia. They have a visa-free agreement with Russia, which is very important to the Russian side because there are relatively few countries that Russian citizens can travel to without a visa. In addition to that, South Korea, despite being a US ally, didn't introduce sanctions. They ignored the US pressure and decided that it wasn't really in their interest to introduce them. So potentially you could have a productive trilateral kind of summit, but it's not on the cards.
Well, thank you to both of our speakers for a very enlightening discussion and also entertaining such a wide range of questions that went quite beyond our topic today. I think we had a very interesting talk. So let's give them a big round of applause. And as is our custom, we'd like to present as a token of gratitude a one-year membership in the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. I thought it was fascinating what you said.